Hello and welcome to the strangest gig I've ever played. True tales from the studio and the stage. I'm your host, Chris J. Norwood. On the podcast with us today is one Sean Russell, lead singer and songwriter for the band Cutthroat Finches and the Nancys. We have a really fun conversation about the current state of the local music fandom and the local scene. It's pretty fascinating, and a funny story about a pirate bar. So stay tuned for that. Without further ado, Sean Russell. Welcome back to The Strangest Gig. Again, my name is Chris J. Norwood. Before we get into Sean, I want to let you know that my new album, The Knockdown Dragout, by Chris J. Norwood and The Knockdown Dragout, is out now, streaming everywhere. And it is awesome, I think. And I hope you do too. You should go check it out. We just had a packed headlining album release show at the Kessler Theater in glorious Oak Cliff, Texas. It was so much fun. If you were there, thank you for coming. If you weren't, check us out. Come see us. We're working on getting some more gigs booked, and we would love to see you. It's a lot of fun. So if you love, good old time rhythm and blues and soul music, come check us out. Follow us on the socials at Chris J. Norwood and come to a show. Listen to our music. Now, Sean Russell is a singer-songwriter from Fort Worth, Texas. He's the frontman for the band Cutthroat Finches. They've been around for a while, put out a few stellar albums. And then they took a bit of a break over the pandemic, as we all did, and took a long time working on their next album. But it is done, I believe. And we're working on mixing and mastering, they are. And they're getting ready to put it out soon. In the meantime, Sean also put together the band called the Nancys, which he describes as Baroque old-time saloon music. So if that doesn't hook you, I don't know what will. Sean has kind of become the go-to guy when it comes to conversations about the local scene and the state they're in, and the local music fandom. We got into a really fascinating conversation about that. And then we finished it up with a really great conversation about a pirate bar that you just got to hear. It's a lot of fun. Sean's a really fun guy, and I enjoyed this conversation. So let's get to it. So, Sean, tell me about your current gig, what you're working on currently.
Yeah.
I know you're in the band Cutthroat Finches.
Yep.
When did Cutthroat Finches start?
We started in late 2015. We released our first album in 2016.
Okay. And how many albums?
We are just literally put the finishing touches on our fourth album. So we'll have our fourth album ready for spring to release in spring.
Great. Where'd you record?
We started, it's an odd thing because in, 16, 17, 18, we basically finished albums all 3 years and released them all about a year apart. And then when the pandemic hit, like a lot of people, of course, everything slowed down and we had all kinds of problems getting released. So it's like from 2019 all the way till now, this will be the next album we've released, which is crazy. So what we had the idea to do as availability came up and in between people being sick or being scared of getting sick, we would go in and write and record. So everything got really spaced out and the pace of things just was horrible. But we recorded some of these songs at Modern Electric with John Pedigo. Okay. We recorded some at Niles City with Joel Rafe. Oh, okay. And then we recorded out with Todd Pipes, which was, he has a studio in Colleyville, but he was the first guy that really introduced me to almost everybody I know in Dallas and Fort Worth music. Okay, cool. And then finished it up at Audio Styles with Taylor Tatch, which is where we recorded the rest of the albums. Were always under Taylor, who's the guitar player in Cutthroat Finches.
Is he still plays with Cutthroat? Okay,
he does.
Great.
He's finishing his studio down in Fredericksburg. I literally was down there last week with him, finishing up at a studio that he's kind of been borrowing and kind of working space in. He's probably about 3 to 4 months away from having his studio finished, but it's awesome. It's a beautiful spot, nice little isolated place.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of pictures of like the build out, and it's
cool. It'll have a nice place to stay, and it'll be a destination place, but you're still close enough to town to hop in and see Fredericksburg and stuff, which is a cool little town. I underestimated it as being a place where old people go to.
A lot of wine,
exactly, wine and potpourris and kitschy craft stuff, but It actually, it's a really cool town, really cool culture actually building in there out of the Kerrville Hill country music scene that's in that I think we'll be hearing more about it for music other than, and not just bachelorette parties and wine tastings, you know.
And then you're not far from Austin. You're a couple hour from Austin or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
cool.
but that little town right, you know, through there, Johnson City and Kerrville and all the areas around there, it's just such a beautiful part of the country, and I'm glad I'd love to do shows there instead of Austin, so you know, I'll be all down for that.
Absolutely. What was it like recording at Niles City?
It was great. We really had a great time at Niles City. I had recorded so the other thing that I'm involved in is a project called the Nancys, and that was going on. The Nancys were recording at the same time that you know, I was kind of recording some of the stuff with Cutthroat Finches, so I was kind of going back and forth working in that studio. Wow. The Nancys and Cutthroat Finches. What's great about that place is just this big open room and the ability, the way you can track live in there, and the sound you can get.
Yeah.
The recording process in there is very different than the way we have tracked traditionally.
How so?
We've tracked in an open room before, and a lot of times in the past we'd track maybe the rhythm tracks to tape, like with Taylor and Audio Style. He's got a great 2-inch tape, which makes a big difference, especially if you're eventually going to end up on vinyl. It makes a big difference. Recording this way. But are in Niles City, I think just the room sound that you pick up is really nice in there. The vibe of the place and it being local for us at the time, especially with young kids, that's the other thing that happened that, of course, slowed a lot of things down for us is, you know, both Drea and Rob, Drea, our drummer, and Rob, our bass player, both had kids within about a month apart of each other. And so the ability to come in and out and track like that was important at the time. But working with Joel, I've known Joel before, you know, Joel Rafe, and he's just nice to work with. And like I said, simultaneously I was recording some stuff with the Nancys, which was everybody that was stuck at home, twiddling their thumbs and not able to tour, not able to put together shows. Some of the guys from the Hendersons, Nolan Robertson and Chris Luther, Nick Tittle, and then some of the guys from Bastards of Soul. That were, you know, some of the horn players and stuff like that. They were actually recording there at the same time, and so Joel drugged them in. So really, it was nice because Joel had some great connections, especially on that project for the Nancys. I don't think it could have happened without the openness and kind of the style of the way Joel records and tries to give you the room. That's
the cool thing. I've never been able to record there, but it's one of the few rooms in town that has ceilings that tall. That Modern Electric are. You know, two of the only few that I know that have ceilings that tall that can give you that big room sound.
Yep. Yeah, we had the same. We had a similar experience, and knowing John and just he's just such a fun guy to record with. Yeah. And him throwing out ideas. John has a lot more ideas. He's interjecting, like we can try this, and is moving and trying different guitar parts in and other elements that he can interject into it. Getting to record with friends, the idea was to bounce around these different studios, but then you have this wide range of difference. When I try to put it together into an album, I give it to Taylor, and Taylor's looking at me like, this is like you just gave me 5 3,000 piece puzzles and you want me to string these all together,
So Taylor mixed the
yes,
album?
Taylor, so the album, the way it'll get released, there's a few variants on. We did change some of the recordings completely. Some of them we retracked some major parts and interjected Taylor back into it because I did have some guest guitar play. I couldn't get Taylor up here for it. It was like it was all most of it was being done during the pandemic.
Right.
So it was very frustrating. It was like the lack of momentum was not just pandemic induced. It was just mentally for all of us. It was like with everything going on, it was a real struggle to get this album out. But not because we weren't passionate about the songs, but just the process to do it. And then you had kids and a lot of other things. This album, we actually finally looked back as we finished these tracks, and we decided to call the album Unraveled. And really, it's like there was a lot of struggles mental health wise for each of us in different ways, addiction and mental health that really wound its way into the album and the songs, even though we record them so
separately, different. Yeah,
right.
That's cool.
Listening back to it, the common threads that were in it were maybe a little a little disconcerting, like
Yeah.
hearing it. So but it was like, okay, this is what this album's really about. We didn't mean for it to be an album to kind of splay that out, but the common threads that are in there are kind of some of the darker parts that we drug in as we were recording this,
That's cool.
So, like I said, we just now are kind of looking back over this last 2 years of recording and thinking, well, that's what this is really about. The songs all sound wildly different between the recording studios that we chose, but also the style of songs and the space in between that didn't make it have as it defined a singular vision sound, which is cool.
Yeah, that's
very
totally
different
cool.
than the other albums.
Yeah.
But but the common threads in the lyric writing, were a little darker than we weren't paying attention to it, really what we were saying until we got to the end. And we're like, wow, there's some of the threads in these, even the happy songs, are some really dark parts in there we shared. So
Man, a global pandemic will do that.
Yes.
Among the other things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just having kids, watching them get sick. I mean, Drea, for instance, on the way home with the baby, they got hit in a car wreck on the way home from the hospital. So it was just like it was a set off and a trigger of so many dark things, And then my own addiction issues, my own problems, just strung in there. I'll speak for myself and let them decide if they want, how much they want to share it. But it was definitely not my highlight reel moments, through a lot of that. So,
and when's the release? Do y'all have a release date?
We don't have a release date. We're working out the final. It's literally in mastering right now, so we're working on the mastering side of it.
Who's mastering?
Todd Pipes.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Going back to Todd. Actually, it's funny because Taylor, on the way over here, Taylor told me he was sending over those files, and I already texted Todd and said, "Are you done with the mastering?" And he goes, "On what?" And I was like, "You'll see." He responds well to threats. If you work with him and you threaten him, he likes that and responds a lot better, just in case.
Yeah, most people do. Yeah.
Make up deadlines, things like that. He loves that.
Tell me about the Nancys. What was that a project that you started, or?
Yes, it was. It was. I started with Nolan Robertson. I was having Nolan help me with some. I just wanted to get his input on pre-production. That was a big part for me that I realized I felt like was missing from the way we wrote songs.
Okay.
And so I started having Nolan Robertson. Again, he's from the Hendersons, and he also had been playing keys with Vodeo and in some other things. But he's truly one of the most untapped resources as far as a producer's mind and the ability to see things in a much more, just a way bigger landscape, more of a classical composer mentality. He's actually at school in a graduate program in North Texas right now. He works on things like film scoring projects. He's been working his craft on film scoring, on video game film score, or video game scoring, things like that. Just a much wider range of things that he doesn't really share publicly, but he's incredibly detailed. His way of stringing together songs in a production sense, to listen to it and think, here's a better way you could string together, or here's how you could add a key change in this bridge. Things that writers there's a finite amount of space that you can wrap your head around. And I think for most people, I mean, unless you're Prince or, just that kind of mentality, then you just are going to hit a wall eventually of the amount of crayons you can have in your box.
Yeah.
But with Nolan, he has a much more, it's like he has, lanes of a highway that go up, down, left, and right. And so I had a song that I was like, this will not fit in the Cutthroat and Finches world, and it's called Evangelicals. And it's kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like Western saloon style, kind of thing. I don't even have a frame of reference for it. Nolan has a frame of reference for it,
Yeah.
He's like, I kind of feel this parochial, Western saloon vibe thing to this thing. And I was like, yeah, that's the parochial part. I don't even know what that means, but the Western saloon, yes, I get. And so his ability to translate in his mind, it's like this memory bank, this data source that he has in his mind to reference songs is unbelievable. So we started working on it and then some other songs. But what we decided was, let's work on some songs together that we just can't fit into we don't feel like fit into our own bands, our own projects now. And so we came up with this wide range of songs. The album is called Cuss Words. We released it last year. There's not a huge amount. We're going to actually play our first show, I think it looks like March 16th at Tulips during this thing called the Southside Spillover. So we recorded most of these songs a year and a half or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Just slow rolled it out because we weren't sure what we were going to do with it or how we were going to promote it. But some of the songs, they range from, like I said, there's layers of French horns and
cool.
clarinets and things like that I've never arranged. But again, with Nolan's help in the producing and pre-production side, it was an amazing project. But the album's called Cuss Words. It has a lot of foul language in it. The lyrics are mostly mine, except for one song called Felt So Right, which is one that Nolan had written the lyrics for. The rest of them are a combination of just frustration over the politics, the general just feeling of things. And then you had other members of the bands that just had songs that just were sitting on the shelf. Like one of the songs is called Shit Again that the band, the Polydogs, had started to work on, and then they broke up. So Nick, who was playing drums, and Chris Luther, who played bass in Polydogs, it's a great song that they wrote. I was like, let's add it to the Nancy. The album's already called Cuss Words, so because one of the first songs I also wrote was called Fuck Me, and it was basically a description of me getting stuck at a 7-Eleven with a guy wanting to tell me all of his, I call him the right-wing Malcolm X, in the song, and that's basically, it's like, I was just like, what are you telling me? I was just here to buy beer, like, God. I mean, just the ass whip of dealing with people, so that's what the song's about. So there's a lot of that kind of like, but the style of the songs are very, very different. They range from like Sgt. Pepper's kind of vibe stuff to even a cover of an O.T. Genesis song called I Look Good Today. That's, super dumb song. I mean, like the way we did it, but I think it's funny. It's
fun, yeah.
So I would say that it's very satirical. It's and that's probably the common thread. Again, looking back at it, is most of the music is pretty satirical based stuff, and the lyrics and the sound, that we chose for the songs. Cool. So it was a lot of fun recording it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Those kind of big, left of center records can be a lot of fun to record.
Yes. And the guys, once the guys from like Jason Davis from Bastards of Soul, and then some of the guys like Geika and some of these guys who play down in the South Side and the Preservation Hall and stuff like that. I mean, once they got there, put their hand in it, started, and we also had a guy, the French horn player got COVID we were supposed to have that Jason found. So Nolan found a guy in the Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra off of the Facebook page for the Symphony Orchestra, great. And he showed up. So
awesome.
So yeah, it was a blast. Honestly, it was the most rewarding musically. It was just another level for me musically to have that kind of work up front and that talent level and the open-endedness to be able to create something like that and just go off on a spiral and change key and drop it down. And if we're going to do a 5-minute song, we're going to do it, you know? We weren't thinking about radio hits or anything or trying to say who would market to. We just wanted to make badass music. And that's
fun. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So let's talk now. You've been a part of these conversations, I know, a lot lately, of just the state of the local music fandom.
Yeah.
And so tell me now, what is your impression of the local music fandom, and maybe as it compares to other markets, as it compares to, what it was 5, 10, 15 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think in several conversations, unfortunately, my name has come up now when there's stories that people are talking about the declination of the music scene. I'm getting quoted a lot more.
You seem to be the go-to guy for a lot.
I know. It's like, man, it's like that is not what I wanted to be known for. but it does seem that more people are talking about it now than ever before. Which I'm glad.
Which is a good thing, I think.
It is. It is, because I don't think it's for a lack of talent or the type of music that's out there or anything like that. I would say though that first of all, that this seems to be going on everywhere. I mean, talking to people in Nashville, and it's the club owners and the bands. The bands, they might complain, they might see differences, but when you talk to the club owners, what they see is the same thing we saw. I was an owner in Maine at Southside, in Fort Worth, and we closed down about a year and a half ago, and now it's the Cicada. But for us, we were looking at like, we're not making money. We're gonna on the lean months where we're probably gonna have to pay in to keep the place open. So what's the point? We just never saw the snapback after the pandemic.
Right.
Well, in that launch, it was like what we were seeing is the same bands that played before that we thought we'd see a boost in numbers. We'd see a cutback of 30 to 40% of the number of people after a series of shows that they'd have, that you were just a guaranteed 200 people would show up,
Right.
And not only would be there 200 people, we knew what the bar sales would be.
Yeah.
And they were down, People were trying to sober up. So not for the worst reasons, Right. I certainly needed to sober up. I didn't, but it was like you would see, we could see those numbers, and it was across the board. And then and then we decided, well, this is what we're going to do. And we didn't really look at the bigger picture of things. We decided this is what we're going to do. But I would say that, first of all, that it seems to be Nashville, Austin, everywhere. They're talking about, and here in Dallas, and nobody wants to talk about it because they don't want to. It's hard to hype up a scene and get people out and excited when they think it's some dying thing they're seeing on the, dying on the vine. So maybe that's why they don't. Music's always been about hype and make things cooler than they really are on social media or commercials or videos or whatever else, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very counterintuitive to people in our industry to lay the cards out and be like, look, there is a major problem here. This is unsustainable. Mm-hmm. If you're running a club in Dallas or Fort Worth and you're sacrificing money for your family if you're having local live music, local original music,
right?
And even in Fort Worth, the country music guys see the same thing. It's
really?
Not like, if you want to play George Strait covers, then you'll kill it, But if you want to be an original writing artist, like there's just not. It's hard. There's a hard living to be made out there, and you're going to have to compromise that, and you're going to have to fit in your original music in between. You're going to have to win people over with covers, and then maybe they'll give you the privilege of listening to what you want to actually sing about.
Yeah.
People aren't really looking for it, and I think Dan Bale has hit it on the head in the Dallas Observer article where he said that he thinks Dallas has turned into a town where they're not looking for. Nobody's there's not enough people it's not a town that wants to have its own scene, that matters to them, that's a priority anymore.
But don't you think that's kind of always been the case for Dallas?
I think it's always had both elements, but I think there was a strong enough art, creative community, and there was a scene that had a synergy that was contagious,
Yes.
and that people wanted to be in on it. That's what I felt about Fort Worth. That was happening 10 years ago, in Fort Worth. And longer than that, but specifically 10 years ago, to where I saw that. I didn't see it in Dallas at the time. It seemed like I didn't know where the core of the scene was anymore. Right. But Fort Worth had this thing going, and there's bands like Calhoun and the Orbans and Burning Hotels and Quaker City Nighthawks. And, there was just a synergy around those bands that made you feel like you were seeing something that you were privileged to get to be at, that this was something that was really good and that these guys knew each other. And it was a community of people, and people have that community's gotten broken up for obvious reasons, but it's been replaced, I think, by a lot of things. And I think that a lot of people have forgotten what they've lost in that, I'm saying? That replacement, if they wait it out, I think if they could tap back into it and they could trade it off and they could say, well, I can either have this new thing that I've got or have what I had over here.
Right.
I wonder if what they would choose,
So what do you think the solution is? Like you said, a lot of people just aren't going out as much.
Sure.
They're not drinking as much.
Yeah.
So how do we create that sense of community? When for so long it was centered around going to the bar and drinking and watching a band.
Sure. I think, I was talking to one of my favorite bands around in Dallas is Brave Little Howl, and those guys. I was talking to Mark actually, the guitar player from Brave Little Howl, about this. And what I saw was what we talked about. My goal for this year is accessibility, like finding ways for people to hear my music and not just saying, if you want to see me, you got to be at 10 o'clock down in Deep Ellum at whatever bar.
Right.
Or you got to be 10 o'clock over at this bar on the south side in Fort Worth, or 11 o'clock or midnight or whatever. The shows are getting earlier, but that has changed, and I like that, actually.
Yes, me as well.
Yeah.
So,
but I think what I see in Fort Worth, for instance, is when we have events like Friday on the Green or the Arts Goggle, whenever you're in front of a group of people that don't normally have access to this, and they trust these programs from the South Side organization, Near South and Fort Worth, for instance, has done a great job of becoming a trusted source for, if we're putting them on the stage, you should probably hear it. And it's worth you getting your family together and packing a picnic blanket and coming out here. We're going to have food trucks, and it's going to be an event that's safe, and it's going to be an event that's going to have that's curated, rather than you show up and just say and not know what's going on. It's like you trust that this is a filtered source of music that is worth hearing. And I feel like they've upheld the trust of the city with that. And I think Arts Goggle has been a similar thing, where we have 35,000 people show up for that event, you know?
Right.
So it's like if we can find better ways to meet people, some of it is through social media. I think musicians don't do a great job necessarily with social media on the local scene.
Sure.
Of creating content. It's tough and everybody hates it and everybody complains about it,
Yeah.
but it is reality. It's like we cannot sit around and complain. But it's also, I also think the future is a more decentralized music scene where we partner with businesses to reach through those businesses and crossover audiences. It's like you saw the collaborations. Everybody's sick of collaborations of everything.
Right.
I'm so burned out on and could care less about collaborative efforts on these pop stars. It's like whoever the next guy is that's cool to collaborate with, and everybody's going to rotate him around town, and then he's going to drop him off at the bus stop, and he'll be done again.
Yeah.
But I do think the collaboration of business provides an opportunity. I think on one side there's that. I think the other side of it that's come up in all these discussions is we used to have in Fort Worth, we are not cultivating the next generation of music, and that is on the national scale. If you look at the tour schedule of who's coming through and who's selling, it's like these bands. There's not many of them you're going to find that are less than 10 years old that are headlining any festival.
Right.
Any festival.
Yeah.
I don't think you and I 20 years ago could have imagined that the headliners of Lollapalooza or whatever
Would still be back. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's clearly a problem with cultivating those next artists aren't even there.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll ever exist at that level. But I also think that's the same thing here. I see even locally, as I see the same names on the same. Like if some promoter's coming in town and they want to get a local guy, it's one of these 4 or 5 bands that they're going to get, and that's all they know. So that's all they get. They're not. And I think one of the solutions that I think a lot of promoters are starting to see is that the social media is steering those clients away. The algorithm is making it very difficult. I can have a band, for instance. I follow the Granada Theater and the Sundown page. I follow the band that's playing there. I am friends with the members of that band, and I still don't even see it. I can barely even find it on social media because I'm just in Fort Worth. There's value to having a local band on your tour. Yeah. And those venues, I think, should realize by now, because it's not their first rodeo, but whether it's the Granada or whether it's Dickey's Arena or whether it's Tannehill's, they should know by now that whoever that opener is, the label is sending or the management group is saying, that opener is paying out of their record label budget to be on that ticket. They provide almost nothing in terms of promotion value.
Right.
And in the social media world, they've got to change their model. Yeah. And I think the cities could do a better job if they're going to do anything, or the businesses, and not just realizing, but proving that model's true. Because like we played a show at Tannehill's, we opened up for a band, and it ended up selling out. Well, the ticket sales were dismal when it started. Now, the problem is I can't track how much it helped, but I guarantee there was a lot of people that saw those promotions because we were on it, promoting it through a different vehicle and through a different avenue. We weren't the national band updating every day with this group and everything, But that opening band on that label, on that show was great, but nobody knew who they were at that time. They were paying to open that show, which is good for the band and everything like that, but it's like they're not really providing a lot of value in that spot other than the money that they're paying to further fund the tour for the headliner.
Right.
So I think if you're a venue owner, or you're, the Granada, or you're whoever it is, you're booking national acts, I think it would be wise to press as much as you can. I know Tara does, by the way. She does ask all the time. So I know she's asking.
Yes.
But I think there's wisdom in seeing that, because I wish they would track. This day, Cutthroat Finches promoted this deal. We saw ticket sales go up by this. We saw traction to the page was this.
Right.
But unfortunately, I haven't got anybody to take the time to do that, to prove that what I'm saying is actually not just crap.
That's great.
But I think those things matter. I think in general, though, a partnership with businesses and the city I'm pressing for Fort Worth to create we are a music friendly town by the Texas Music Office, right? I would like a standard for a business to say, I support local artists.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? That means I don't have Thomas Kincaid paintings on the walls, right? I've got real artists from Fort Worth on the walls.
Yeah.
And if there's music, the benign music nobody's even listened to, I need those spins. You know,
Yeah.
play Cutthroat Finches all day and night.
Sure,
You know?
yeah.
I need those plays.
Yeah.
Even if it is Spotify. Whoever this Brazilian band is that's softly playing at your coffee shop, they don't even know who you are or care.
Right.
I care, you know. So play my music. And those kind of things, that joining of forces, I think does the city good.
Yeah.
And I think because it sets the city apart, that collaboration between the arts community, instead of being you're the big lame commercial building coming in and gentrifying and destroying our culture. Instead,
Right.
It's like, bring them in as partners. We need them.
Yeah.
Because if that is selling out, and you're going to try to tell me that the record label model, which really is just how many Instagram followers do you have and how many Spotify followers, and are you willing to do this
Right.
for 1/10 of a penny per play? If that is not selling out in the most absolute whorish fashion, then I don't know what. That is the biggest sellout that has ever been proposed to the music industry, and yet everybody is just lapping it up like a effing dog.
Right.
So I am all for, if selling out means a local business benefits from playing my music and I can benefit them and vice versa, I'm all for that version. That sounds way cooler.
Yeah.
Collaborating with a restaurant or a friggin' law firm or the local plumber sounds way better to me than dealing with Spotify and Instagram
Or
or
Universal.
TikTok.
Yeah.
Screw that
of course.
shit.
I've been of the mindset that, and maybe this is wishful thinking, I don't know, but I've been of the mindset lately that, we went through a pandemic where, again, like we've talked about, people just don't go out anymore. People in general live in their phones. They seek entertainment on their phones. There's so much. I guess I've always hoped that eventually there'd be this coming back around where people are going to kind of look up and go, you know what? I'm kind of sick of staring at a screen. I need to go out and be with people.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way? Do you think that could happen?
Yeah.
And do you see that happening in the near future or in the next 50 years?
I think with time over the next few years, I think we still will unwind. There just hasn't been that snap back, that because again, we looked at 1920s and we thought, well, look, after that pandemic, look what happened. Like maybe the Roaring '20s are going to come back. It didn't happen because they didn't have a replacement. Like their fun was drink gin out of a bathtub, basically, right? I mean, I don't know what they did. Just stared at the sun and grew beets. I mean, I don't know what they did, So it was very easy to sell a nightlife and an ability to come. But I think there's so I think we overestimated like how things would lay out,
How quickly things would come back, maybe.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I think it will be a slow thing, but I do believe people are still seeking, even through social media. I think they realize what a lie it is. I use it all the time.
Sure.
I just made a big stupid video with the Ottoman Turks and everything like that I put out that I spent way too much time on. That's super dumb. But it's funny to me. So I don't hate social media. I don't even hate Spotify or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to depend on that. That shouldn't have the effect or the weight that it holds on what I do, or be in a way that people equate value to me. But I think in terms of with people, I think the community aspect is something that people have not been able to replace. And I think the mental health of this country is proof that we cannot replace. Like social media is not replacing community. And I think that there is almost like a law of gravity when it comes to community, a human need for culture and community that is not being fed, and therefore anxiety and other things like that rise. And I know for me, I didn't realize it. It's only been when we're looking in retrospect at this album.
Yeah.
Anxiety has not been a problem, but the things that I started to believe during the pandemic, just watching the news in isolation, the things that I was teaching myself and that I was accepting as truths were very dangerous and very destructive. And as I've unraveled from them, I've realized, I think other people are going to come to the same conclusions. I don't think I'm some mental health expert or some yogi stuff. Like I have this crazy enlightenment aspect to what I'm doing, but it's funny how some of those things got to be such truths in my mind that I was unaware of the effect that they were having on me around other people, and the things that I let linger that I knew weren't true. So I think people will. I'm hopeful that people will find reconnect in that way. I just think that we as musicians need to find ways to be accessible. One of the examples too, by the way, I would say that was very it was revelatory for me in terms of accessibility. Just watching what people are doing and how people are blowing up on social media. For instance, if you're gonna use social media at all, I mean, you can try to reject it and see if you can Tom York your way to the top, but I don't think it'll work. But there's a guy named Teddy Swims, right? And he's he's a very popular TikTok star, has millions of followers. And he was apparently been out grinding on the road in a hard rock band and can sing his ass off and couldn't get any traction. Yeah. And I'm not reading his biopic, so these are just the loose pieces I picked up. We had a friend that was friends with him, invited us to the factory. We go down there. We have no idea who he is, but he's like, you got to come down and meet this guy. It's so awesome. We got VIP. Go back and meet him. We go back and meet him. He gives us this big old hug. And I started thinking, this might be one of the people I met when I was super drunk, and just have forgotten, because he hugged me like we knew each other our whole lives. He was one of the nicest guys ever. And anyways, he blew up on social media because he was going through a breakup very publicly and was writing songs and singing covers. And he was getting millions of plays from some stuff that Journey had done. He actually had an invitation, as I understand it, to possibly tour with them and sing for Journey. Wow. He has that good a chops.
Sings his ass off, yeah.
Yes. So I go to the show at the factory with, by the way, the tallest audience I've ever. I stood at 6 foot. I felt like I was a very short person. I don't understand how many basketball players, why they.
He's reached that demographic.
It's unbelievable. He's reached it. People over 6 foot tall. Fucking love this guy. It's unbelievable. But the factory was packed out, and I just remember thinking, like, this guy made himself vulnerable and acceptable, and I think musicians have not done a great job of that. We are still trying to follow the Tom York, the Morrissey, stay aloof, mysterious bullshit. It's like, okay, Edward Scissorhands, like whatever you're thinking you're doing over there is not that interesting anymore. Sure. So. There's a lot of cliches that we still. I think musicians in general are. I'm not saying it's their fault. It's just that we're still following a model and imitating or emulating things that are models that don't exist anymore. Right. We're seeing and we're following things that happened 20 years ago, and we would normally know that surely that's not what you do. But I see even young bands still doing the same things. But I think when we make ourselves accessible. Through like how can people how can we get average soccer mom to understand who we are as a band? Because if just my musician friends know who I am and think I'm cool, God love them, I'm wasting my time. I need Karen to want to hear Cutthroat Finches. You know what I mean? So if I can get Karen to care about what I'm doing, and I've made myself accessible to where she can understand what I'm trying to do in my music, that's where social media can be a benefit to us. It's not about being a tribute band or a cover band. It's just that people don't understand. There's not the trusted filters we grew up in. One of the models that's broken, the paradigms, is that radio and things like I grew up with The Edge. It was like I was told what was cool by the DJs on The Edge. Yeah. By Mark or Jeff or whoever, right? Jeff K would tell me exactly what I need to be listened to keep me ahead of the curve and the coolest guy. And then I could go to Bill's Records and they'd tell me the other 10 things they don't even know about because they just came out yesterday from Holland, It's like, wow, I'll buy it, So there's not a system of trusted filtration anymore. Yeah. And now, unfortunately, people are relying on an algorithm to tell them where the music is, and people don't even know where it's coming from, and it's so I think people what the case I would make to people is that when you're being fed something, it may not be what you really need. When you let this computer feed, like one of the things is the things that you wouldn't like that are outside that kind of are itchy and sandpapery might be exactly what you need to hear that's going to change your opinion and open your eyes to something different. That's
cool. I love that. Let's get into some fun stuff. Tell me now about the strangest gig you've ever played.
Okay, yes. The strangest gig I ever played, when I first started recording, I met basically everybody I know through the Pipes Brothers in the music business to start off, including Taylor Tatch. So at the time I had Taylor Tatch, and then I met Taylor Young, who was in a band called Hi-Fi Drowning at the time. But Taylor Young played drums, an incredible drummer, and Nolan Thies. And Nolan had been in a couple different bands also at the time, but they were all kind of, getting out of school. I was recording, and they started playing shows with me. And so the first time I got invited to some of the South by, bypass shows, around South by, I was so excited. I mean, I was just like, I'm going down and getting my foot in the door at South by. And
what year was this?
This is about 2008 or 9, maybe 2010. Yeah. And so I was doing this, doing solo music, and and I get this invitation to go to this place to check in at this, and then I was supposed to go here, and then I'm going to be playing this place called the Pirate Bar.
Okay.
And I was just like, the Pirate Bar. And I didn't know if it was a nickname, because some of them have sponsors like the Twix such and such stage. So I didn't know if this was a whiskey or a rum, or I don't know what it was, but it was called the Treasure Island Pirate Bar. So I thought Treasure Island was like the liquor sponsor. I was just trying to figure out where it was and where we could possibly stay to load in gear and deal with a South by just ass whipping of nobody's going to backline, nobody's going to communicate with you, nobody's going to tell you anything. You just show up, and hopefully the gig is still happening, and you just cart your stuff 8 blocks to get to the venue. So we did. We go down to this place, and the place is called the Treasure Island Pirate Bar. and not only that, but when we walk in, it is a full-on, on the right-hand side of the bar. This is right on 6th Street, and there's a full pirate ship that is the bar.
Oh,
I mean, it's the size of like the Six Flags pirate ship.
Yeah.
It is like that, and it's cut in half and made into a bar basically.
Wow.
So we come in, and when you play, and you're facing out into the audience, it's a smaller stage. But it's on the left-hand side is the ass end of this boat. So you're basically playing to the ass end of a pirate boat, kind of off to your left. But then just to top it off and make it way even better. So we play our show. They're offering quarter beers.
Of course.
There's like 3 people in there. That's all they can get. I mean, there's 1,000 people outside, but even at quarter beer, it's a little on the pricey side for what they can get. So they're still just walking right on by. But then, just to make it better, so Toby Pipes shows up. He's the only person listening to us, basically, enjoying the quarter beer Amstel Lights. But as all these people are coming by, all of a sudden, as we set up and are just about to start, we see this film crew come in. So we're thinking, this is awesome. Wow, we can see that it's tied to public television, so we're going to get some really great cover. We're going to get at least some B-roll, something. And they're staring through the front of this big open window that faces 6th Street. And basically, all of a sudden, this puppet situation starts happening. And it was the public radio puppet show. It was basically happening in the window, just like this window, about 5 or 6, or maybe 8 feet wide. And that opens out to 6th Street, and they've decided to do their puppet show in the window. Well, the cameras that are like that basically are blocking the entrance to the place, so you could barely even get in, and nobody will come even close to this puppet show going on. So we're basically playing the whole show to the if you imagine the guys with their hands up, and all you're doing is seeing their ass cracks, and they're just, they're playing with these puppets, and you're going, what? And we can't hear anything, so it's us playing all this noise and the ass end of a puppet show, basically, in a pirate bar. It's this is the worst thing I've ever seen. It's and what was funny is we ended up finding out that I believe it was Swerve Driver was playing down the street. Oh. And so we just decided, let's just cut these last 2 songs. We did.
Let's call it early.
We cut it early. We played 6 songs. Ended the show, packed up. There was nobody even there to say, hey, welcome, here's your badge, here's your free quarter beer, anything. So we just packed our stuff up, asked if we could leave it there for a bit, went and watched Swerve Driver, and then left. So hot show. Now, for everybody else, it was, hey, we're playing at South by. You can't miss the show. Yeah. So
that's what went out on social media.
Yes, exactly. It was I think that was a MySpace post. Maybe. Sure. I think MySpace is still open. It hadn't been invaded by Russian prostitutes and all that stuff. So
only uphill from there.
So,
all right. To close it out, tell me about your dream gig, and that could be dream venue, dream bill. Could be maybe a gig you've already played, whatever that means to you, your dream gig.
That's an interesting question. I have honestly never tried to visualize what that is, what that would be. I think it's kind of my dream gig would be to play to a large audience of, let's say 1,000 people. I love those kind of shows. I mean, like Tannehill's, I love that venue. I love playing there, and the bands that I played that have toured through there, I mean, they really treat you well. Tim loves places, the venue, they do a great job. But I would just say that to play to an audience that I felt like I had earned of that size, and that that really listened and knew my song, like having people sing along with my songs in those few, like when we played House of Blues, we opened for Flicker Stick, and there was enough people there that were singing along and everything like that. That was just huge. And cool. But then seeing them sing along with the Flicker Stick songs, I was like, that would be the most rewarding thing for me.
That's cool, yeah.
You know, at any size, whether it's 100 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people. For me, it's not about making a living as a musician necessarily, because it's like that will happen or it won't happen, but that experience would be worth it for what I've done. Yeah. It would be the capper. And then, of course, I'd come back on the show and say, now that's not enough. Now I need to sell out, you know, this, or it's not going to be enough.
Sure.
It's never enough, right?
Absolutely. Well, Sean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and driving all the way from Fort Worth. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It was really nice. Nice talk.
You bet. Have a good one. All right. There he goes. Thanks so much to Sean Russell for coming on the podcast. What a fun conversation that was. Y'all be sure to check out the Cutthroat Finches and the Nancys. Give them some love and some follows. Go to a show. Show them that you're a local music fan that really still cares about going to see live local original music. We need your support. Also, The Knockdown Dragout, the debut album by Chris J. Norwood and The Knockdown Dragout, is out now, streaming everywhere. Please go listen to it. I would love that so much. And come see us at a show as well. Follow us on the socials at Chris J. Norwood. If you're a fan of this podcast, The Strangest Gig, I would appreciate you giving us some love as well. Follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, so you never miss an episode. And please tell your friends, spread the good word about The Strangest Gig. Again, I am your host, Chris J. Norwood. And until next time, if you find yourself playing to the ass end of a puppet in a pirate bar, just remember, a gig's a gig, right?